Welcome to today's deep dive. If you've ever tried to learn a new language, you know exactly how overwhelming it can feel.
Oh, absolutely.
You stare at a textbook, you see this massive grid of verbs and rules, and your brain just it just short circuits.
Yeah, you just hit a wall.
Exactly. Well, today, we are taking a completely different approach. We are unpacking a highly focused language lesson from a YouTube video by an instructor named Alex.
Mm-hmm.
And our mission today is to look at exactly how this instructor teaches the conjugation of the Portuguese verb ser, which translates to be in the present tense.
And just to clarify right off the bat, we are definitely not going to just recite verb tables at you today.
No, please no.
Right. That would defeat the entire purpose of this deep dive. What we are looking at is the actual architecture of a really effective lesson. We're examining the pedagogical choices this instructor makes to guide a student from absolute zero to actually understanding colloquial regional Portuguese.
We are going to tease out some major aha moments today. I promise you, this isn't just about rote memorization. You are going to see how the instructor builds this brilliant mental scaffold.
Yeah, it really is brilliant.
They start from the most basic foundational rules, they actively test comprehension, and then just when you think you have the rules figured out, they throw in these fascinating colloquial curveballs and even musical references.
Which is the best part.
It really is.
Yeah.
Okay, let's unpack this. Where does the instructor actually begin? Because it's not with the verb itself, which initially caught me off guard.
Yeah, the choice to start elsewhere is purely strategic. Before even touching the verb ser, the video spends a significant amount of time locking down the personal pronouns.
Right.
And from a pedagogical standpoint, this is all about managing cognitive load. I mean, you cannot build a house without a foundation.
Makes sense.
If a student is trying to remember the unfamiliar sounds of a new verb conjugation, but they are still struggling to remember how to simply say I or we, the brain becomes entirely overloaded.
It's just too much at once.
Exactly. The lesson isolates the variables. First, we master the actors in the sentence. Only then do we introduce the action.
That makes perfect sense. If you don't know who is performing the action,
The action itself is meaningless.
completely. And the way Alex breaks down these pronouns is incredibly systematic. They divide them into two very clear camps. You have singular, referring to one person, and plural, referring to more than one person.
The structure provided in the video is a classic logical binary, one person versus multiple people.
So for the singular grouping, they lay out eu, which means I, then você, meaning you, ele, which is he, and ela, which is she. And then they show how those concepts scale up into the plural grouping. So you have nós, meaning we. Você is for the plural you, like you all or y'all. Eles, which is the masculine they, and elas, the feminine they.
And notice how the video doesn't just list these words on the screen for the viewer to read passively. There's a very specific call to action here.
Yeah, the instructor actually says, vamos repetir, meaning let's repeat. They literally have the audience chant these groupings out loud.
Right.
Yeah, você, ele, ela, nós, yes, eles, elas. They do it multiple times. It felt like they were trying to build muscle memory.
Well, building muscle memory is exactly the goal, and it goes way beyond simply memorizing vocabulary. It is about establishing rhythm.
Okay, rhythm, right.
Human memory relies heavily on chunking and auditory patterns. By chanting those pronouns in that specific order, the student internalizes the sequence as a melody of sorts.
Like a song.
Yes. And when we get to the actual verb conjugations, that pre-established rhythm is going to act as a mental filing cabinet. The student already knows the order of the drawers. Dropping the new verb forms into those pre-existing drawers becomes a much smoother cognitive process.
Which brings us to the core mechanics. Once those pronoun drawers are built and labeled, Alex finally introduces the verb ser. Right. And they walk the learner through the exact pairings for the present tense. Going back to your mental filing cabinet analogy, we open the first drawer and get eu, meaning I am.
Perfect.
Then we get a grouping for the next three drawers. Você é, ele é, ela é. Moving to the plurals, we have nós somos, and then another grouping to finish it out. Vocês, não, eles são, eles são.
The pacing here is crucial. Just like with the pronouns, the instructor says, vamos repetir, and they run through the entire sequence again to cement it. But the real genius of this presentation is how it highlights the natural efficiency of the Portuguese language.
Because you aren't actually learning 8 different words for those 8 different pronouns.
Exactly. A novice might look at a grid of 8 pronouns and panic, assuming they're about to memorize 8 entirely unique verb forms. But Alex's visual presentation groups, The identical verb forms together to help the listener spot patterns quickly.
Right, the visual grouping is huge.
Você, ele, and ela all use the exact same verb form, which is a. The
Okay.
student just learns the short sound a, and they have instantly unlocked 3 different ways to communicate.
And the same efficiency applies to the plurals. Vocês, eles, and elas all use the form as thing.
So instead of memorizing 8 distinct vocabulary words, the burden on the brain is slashed in half. The student only really has to memorize 4 sounds: so, somos, and some.
Wow.
By grouping them this way, the instructor massively reduces the intimidation factor. The learner realizes this isn't some insurmountable mountain, it's just a pattern waiting to be recognized.
It takes all the fear out of the process.
Yeah.
But, listening to a pattern and actually being able to use it out in the world are two very different things.
Oh, definitely.
And the instructor clearly knows this because right after they introduce these conjugations, they pivot immediately into an interactive application. It's pop quiz time.
Put them on the spot.
Exactly. Alex says, let's see if you understood, and they launch into a comprehension quiz right there in the video.
This is the moment passive learning transitions into active recall. The instructor stops lecturing and forces the student's brain to retrieve the information it just encoded. To see how effective this is, let's run through the exact pop quiz from the video. I will put you in the hot seat.
Oh, boy. Okay. Put me in the mindset of the student. I am ready.
Okay, question number 1 is a direct matching exercise. The prompt on the screen is "you blank brasileiro," and your multiple choice options are A, su, B, a, or C, somos.
Well, looking back at the mental filing cabinet, eu means I, and that was the very first drawer. The verb that goes in that drawer is su, so the answer has to be eu sou brasileiro, I am Brazilian.
Spot on. Now notice how straightforward that first question is. It is a direct one-to-one correlation. You see the pronoun eu, you immediately reach for the verb form su.
Yeah, it felt pretty easy.
And that's by design. This is designed to give the learner an immediate dopamine hit. Getting that first question right builds confidence, making the student feel capable and ready for the next challenge.
I definitely felt a little rush of victory there. Hit me with the next one.
Question 2 scales things up slightly to test plural matching. The prompt is nós blank estudantes de português. We blank students of Portuguese. The options this time expand to A, su, B, a, si somos, and D, são.
Okay, nos means we. That's the plural side of our cabinet. And the verb that paired with nos was somos. So si somos, no somos estudantes de portugués.
Another successful retrieval. The student is smoothly navigating the patterns they built earlier. But question 3 is where the pedagogy fundamentally shifts. This is no longer about simple recall. This is about actual comprehension.
Bring on the trick question.
Here it is. The prompt is Sarah e Luan blank Brasileiros, Sarah and Luan blank Brazilians. The options remain A, su, B, a, C, somos, and D, som, what goes in the blank.
Okay, this requires a totally different kind of thinking. I'm not just looking for a direct word match anymore. I have to look at Sarah e Luan and translate that concept into a pronoun in my head first. Sarah and Luan, that's multiple people. It doesn't include me, so it's not we. It doesn't include the person I'm talking to, so it's not you all. Therefore, Sarah and Luan equates to they, specifically the masculine plural es. And the verb form for eles is some, so the answer is D, some Sarah e Luan, some brasileiros.
What's fascinating here is the conceptual leap the instructor is demanding from the viewer. In the first 2 questions, the prompt gave you the exact pronoun on a silver platter.
Right.
But by deliberately removing the explicit pronoun and switching to the compound subject, Sarah y Luan, the instructor forces the brain to do the actual heavy lifting of translation.
You have to deduce the underlying grammatical reality of the sentence.
Once the student makes that conceptual leap and maps Sarah y Luan to Alice, they can retrieve the correct conjugation. This progression is masterful because it ensures the student truly grasps the mechanics of the language rather than just parroting memorized pairs like a robot.
And just when the student is feeling incredibly proud of themselves, feeling like they have totally conquered the rules of Portuguese grammar, here's where it gets really interesting.
A twist.
Yes. The instructor suddenly pulls the rug out and introduces colloquial curveballs. They bring up a concept that language learners call false friends, specifically focusing on the phrase a gente.
Up until this moment in the video, everything has been very textbook. The rules are neat, tidy, and strictly aligned with traditional grammar grids, but native speakers rarely talk like textbooks.
Almost never.
By introducing a gente, Alex is pulling back the curtain on how Portuguese is actually spoken out in the wild.
And they start with a very explicit warning about this false friend. If you look at the phrase "a gente" and translate it literally into English, it means the people.
Which sets an English speaker up for a massive linguistic trap.
Oh, yeah.
You see the people, and you naturally assume you are talking about a large, anonymous group. You would expect it to act like the word they.
But Alex points out that in everyday Brazilian Portuguese, it operates completely differently. A gente is actually used as a casual, everyday replacement for the word we.
This creates a deeply fascinating grammatical paradox. The instructor lays it out very clearly in the lesson. Grammatically speaking, the phrase "achente" requires the singular verb form a. You conjugate it as if you were talking about he or she.
Right.
However, semantically, in its actual meaning and function in a sentence, it is the exact equivalent of the plural nos somos, which means we are.
It is totally mind-bending for a beginner to wrap their head around.
Yeah.
You are using a singular verb to talk about a plural group of people. You are essentially using the verb for he is to say we are.
It is a leaf.
To prove this point and anchor it in the student's mind, the video shares this exact mathematical formula on screen. Alex says, Sara e eu somos do Brasil. Sara and I are from Brazil. That is the exact equivalent of saying a gente do Brasil, which is also the exact equivalent of saying nós somos do Brasil.
This equation is a beautiful illustration of how spoken language evolves. Human beings are fundamentally wired for linguistic efficiency. We are always looking for the path of least resistance when communicating. Saying a gente is physically faster and requires less effort from the mouth and vocal cords than saying no somos.
People will always invent a shortcut if one is available.
Exactly. The instructor is giving the listener a secret key to sounding like a local. The underlying message of this section of the video is profound. Yes, you must learn the textbook rules to understand the foundation, but you must also learn when to break those rules, because the messy exceptions are where the real life of the language exists.
The lesson doesn't shy away from that messy reality at all. In fact, Alex continues exploring the living, breathing nature of the language by diving into regional nuances next. They introduce one final pronoun that wasn't in our original filing cabinet, the word tu.
Right.
And they add a specific caveat right away, noting that this pronoun is only used in some regions.
Providing that sociolinguistic context is vital. In many parts of Brazil, the pronoun você has almost entirely replaced tu in everyday speech. If a student walked around São Paulo using tu all the time, they would sound a bit out of place.
Right, like they're reading a Victorian novel or something.
Exactly. However, in certain specific regions of Brazil, and overwhelmingly in Portugal, tu remains deeply ingrained in daily conversation.
So by including it, but clearly labeling it as regional, the instructor gives the student a comprehensive view without confusing them about what their default vocabulary should be. And the conjugation they provide for this regional pronoun is tu.
Since 2A's isn't part of the main grid we memorized earlier and it doesn't fit neatly into our 4 main drawers, it runs a high risk of being forgotten.
To make sure it sticks, the instructor uses a pop culture tool. They anchor the grammar rule using music. Specifically, they quote the song Rosa, sung by the famous Brazilian artist Marisa Monte.
Such a great choice.
The video actually features this great clip of the lyrics. Tu és divina e graciosa, estatua majestosa, which translates to something like, you are divine and graceful, a majestic statue. It's so much more evocative and memorable than staring at a flashcard with two A's written on it.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this transition from raw linguistic instruction into cultural immersion demonstrates one of the most powerful strategies in cognitive science. Utilizing art, poetry, and music is arguably the best way to internalize complex information.
Why does our brain latch onto a song so much better than a spreadsheet of verbs?
It comes down to how the brain encodes memory. When you stare at a textbook grid, you are relying almost entirely on semantic memory, which is fragile. But music introduces rhythm, melody, and emotion. These elements activate different areas of the brain, including the hippocampus and the amygdala, creating multiple cognitive hooks. A student might easily forget a conjugation chart they studied for an hour, but if they get a beautiful emotional melody stuck in their head, the grammar, in this case 2 A's, comes along for the ride. The rhythm and rhyme make the conjugation practically unforgettable.
The strategy works so well that even Alex gets swept up in the vibe. The video ends with the instructor admitting that just quoting those lyrics made them want to go listen to the song. They sign off with a very casual, "Até a próxima galera," which translates to, "See you next time, guys." It perfectly encapsulates the energy of the whole lesson. It is highly structured, but it is ultimately joyful.
Cultivating that joy serves a highly functional purpose in education. A relaxed, entertained brain absorbs and retains information much more efficiently than a stressed or bored one. By ending on a note of musical appreciation and a casual, friendly sign off, the instructor lowers the affective filter. They leave the student feeling positive and energized about the learning experience, ensuring they won't dread coming back for the next lesson.
So what does this all mean? When we look back at the entirety of this deep dive, it is amazing how much pedagogical depth is packed into such a short, seemingly simple video.
Truly.
Alex brilliantly captures the entire arc of the language learning journey. You start with the strict foundational textbook rules, memorizing those pronouns and building your mental filing cabinet. Then you test your ability to apply those rules in real time under pressure. And finally, you graduate into the messy, beautiful reality of how people actually communicate, navigating regional slang, false friends, and musical poetry.
The reason this matters to you, the listener, whether you are actively trying to learn Portuguese right now, or if you are simply fascinated by how humans construct meaning, is that understanding these layers prevents the paralysis of information overload.
Yes.
When you realize that language isn't just an arbitrary list of rules designed to torture you, but rather a highly structured system with identifiable patterns, it becomes manageable.
The intimidation factor drops away completely.
And when you recognize that colloquialisms like agente and cultural touchstones like the song Rosa are actually tools designed to help you rather than distractions, the language suddenly feels alive. It transforms from a static academic subject into a deeply practical human skill.
You stop fighting the language and start flowing with it. Which leaves us with a final thought for you to mull over today as you go about your life. Consider your own native language. Think about the quirks and contradictions you use every single day without even realizing it.
There are so many of them.
What are the grammatical rules you break effortlessly? Like referring to a company as they, even though it is a singular entity. Or think about the specific childhood songs, nursery rhymes, or advertising jingles you still implicitly rely on to remember a spelling rule or historical fact. How do these invisible, everyday shortcuts not only help you communicate faster, but actually shape the way you think about your own identity and culture?
It is always worth reflecting on the invisible architecture of the words we use every day.
It really is. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the hidden architecture of language learning. We'll be back next time to unpack another fascinating topic with you.